Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to plunge into a book that really, well, it flips the script on a lot of self-help thinking. Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Right.
Forget all that forced positivity stuff. Our mission here is to dig out some maybe surprising wisdom about what actually matters.
Yeah, and why maybe not caring about everything is like a genuine superpower.
Okay.
What's really interesting is Manson's honesty. He basically argues life's just too short to throw your emotional energy around willy-nilly.
Idyllic, yeah.
It's not about apathy, though. It's deliberate, strategic even, deciding where you invest your limited, well, your fecks, as he puts it, focusing them on what actually helps you grow, what aligns with your values.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. The title, it sounds rebellious, right? Like don't care about anything. But you're saying it's not indifference. So what's the real power in being so selective?
Exactly. Think about it, your emotional energy, your mental bandwidth. It's finite. If you spend it on every little annoyance, every comment thread online, you just drain the tank.
Right. Nothing left for the big stuff.
Precisely. Manson argues that consciously choosing what not to care about is actually how you define what you do care about, intensely, meaningfully. It's like an intelligent investment of your attention.
That kind of leads into another maybe uncomfortable idea in the book, which is that happiness, it doesn't mean a life without problems.
Mm-hmm.
He says problems are inevitable, totally central to life. So what makes a problem a better problem, and how do we choose them?
Well, we're all kind of wired to avoid discomfort, aren't we? But Manson suggests trying to escape problems is itself a problem. A better problem is one you choose, one you decide is worth struggling with because it lines up with your values, it leads to growth.
Okay, like what?
So complaining about, I don't know, traffic jams, that's a bad problem. It doesn't really get you anywhere. But struggling to learn a new language or figuring out a tricky relationship or chasing a hard career goal, those are better problems. Why? Because they stretch you. They make you dig deeper.
So happiness isn't about avoiding problems.
Yeah. No, it's about engaging in a meaningful struggle, choosing your struggle.
Okay. And with problems comes responsibility. That's another big theme. The book claims taking responsibility, even for stuff you didn't cause, actually gives you power.
Right.
That sounds tough.
Right.
Especially if you feel overwhelmed. How does he suggest you actually apply that, this internal locus of control idea?
Yeah, it sounds tough, but it can be really liberating, actually. Manson makes this key distinction between fault and responsibility. You might not be at fault for something happening. Maybe you got laid off because the economy tanked. Not your fault.
Okay.
But you are, according to him, 100% responsible for your response. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about claiming your agency. What do you do next? Do you just despair? Or do you start polishing your resume, reaching out to contacts?
So the power is in how you react.
Exactly. Your reaction, your batting stance, as he might say, that's entirely up to you. That's where the control lies.
And this ties into another idea that goes against the grain. Failure. Not something to avoid, he says, but actually the path to growth. How does he reframe that, given, how much society hates failure?
Yeah, we're taught to fear it, right? Manson argues that fear often comes from ego or this deep-seated need to be seen as special or perfect. But if you avoid failure, you avoid risks. You avoid trying new things. You avoid, growing.
So failure is data.
Pretty much. Vital feedback. Every mistake, every misstep has a lesson embedded in it if you look. The goal isn't always the perfect outcome first try. It's the process. Striving, learning, adjusting from those failures. That's the real win.
And then building on that, he hits us with maybe the most radical idea of all. You are not special.
Yeah.
It sounds harsh. But he says accepting your ordinariness is incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
How does that square with, everything telling us to be unique and extraordinary?
It totally flies in the face of it, and that's kind of the whole point, that constant pressure. To be exceptional, better than everyone, it just breeds anxiety and, frankly, disappointment for most people.
True.
Manson suggests that this need to be special is often a really superficial value. When you can genuinely accept that you're, pretty normal like most people, you stop performing for others.
And that frees up energy.
Exactly. Huge amounts of mental bandwidth. You can then focus on just building a good life through consistent, often kind of mundane effort. Not chasing some mythical extraordinary status, finding meaning in the everyday stuff.
Okay, so if we're letting go of superficial values, embracing being ordinary, what should we care about then? What should we give a feck about? The book talks about choosing values that are real, honest, that help us grow. How does he distinguish a good value from a bad one?
He lays out a pretty clear framework. Good values are reality-based, they're socially constructive, and crucially, they're controllable. They depend on you. Things like honesty, innovation, vulnerability, curiosity. These are internal states or actions you can choose. Bad values, they're often outside your control, or they're superficial, or maybe even socially destructive.
Examples.
Popularity, trying to be liked by everyone, always needing to be right. Or maybe feeling good all the time, avoiding conflict at all costs, choosing honesty over always being right, for example. That means you operate from integrity, even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
And that, he argues, leads to a more fulfilling life because it's built on something solid, something internal, not just external validation.
Now, so let's try to bring this all together. What does this mean for you listening? This deep dive suggests that maybe true well-being isn't about dodging problems. It's about bravely choosing meaningful ones to solve and embracing failure, not as an end, but as like an engine for growth. And maybe accepting our own ordinariness is actually liberating.
Yeah.
It seems to boil down to being incredibly selective with your focus, your energy, your cares.
Definitely. And if we connect all those threads, it really leaves you with a pretty important question, doesn't it? You know, if life is limited, which it is, and problems are just part of the deal, what better problems are you going to consciously choose to take on today, starting now?
Right.
And what good values, the honest, growth-focused ones you can actually control, are you going to commit to living by instead of, just chasing likes or trying to be right all the time or forcing that relentless positivity? What really matters to you?